Now that you have an executable migration plan from Phase App, you are ready for the moment where enterprise architecture is truly tested. Implementation governance. Phase G is where your architecture direction either becomes real or becomes optional. This phase is not about controlling teams for the sake of control. It is about ensuring the enterprise gets the outcomes it funded, the risks it promised to manage, and the operational stability it depends on. When you run Phase G well, you protect delivery speed by preventing late surprises and rework. When you run it poorly, you either create bureaucracy that teams bypass, or you create weak governance that allows drift and increases cost and risk. Building on that purpose, you should treat Phase G as the guardrail layer of enterprise change. You have already agreed on vision, business priorities, data and application direction, technology foundations, roadmaps, and migration sequencing. Phase G ensures those decisions are honored during delivery. It defines how architectural compliance is checked, how deviations are handled, and how accountability is maintained. In leadership terms, Phase G is the difference between we agreed and we delivered. It is also the phase where trust is built, because teams will only respect governance that is fair, predictable, and helpful. With that framing, you should understand why implementation governance often fails in real organizations. It fails when reviews happen late, when teams have already built significant work and governance appears as a surprise audit. It fails when governance is vague, so teams do not know what evidence is required or what standards apply. It fails when decision rights are unclear, so reviews become discussions without decisions. It also fails when governance tries to review everything equally, which creates bottlenecks and encourages bypass behavior. In Phase G, your leadership job is to design governance that is early, risk-based, and decision-centric, so it protects flow rather than interrupts it. Now that you know the failure patterns, you can introduce architecture contracts in the right way. An architecture contract is not a legal document that scares delivery teams. It is a clear agreement that defines what will be delivered, what architecture standards and principles apply, what compliance evidence is required, and how exceptions will be handled. It aligns stakeholders on responsibilities and expectations. It also protects delivery teams because it reduces ambiguity and prevents moving goalposts. When architecture contracts are used well, they turn governance into clarity. Teams know what good means, leaders know what they are funding, and architects know what they must assure. With the role of contracts clear, you should keep them lean and outcome focused. You include the scope of the solution or program, the key architecture requirements and standards that must be met, the non-negotiables such as identity and access controls, and logging expectations, and the target architecture direction that the work must align to. You also include measurable success criteria, the decision checkpoints where architecture input is required, and the exception process that allows flexibility with accountability. The contract works when it becomes a shared reference point that reduces conflict. It fails when it becomes a large document that nobody reads. In Phase G, your discipline is to make the contract useful, not heavy. Now that contracts establish expectations, compliance reviews provide assurance. The key mindset is that compliance reviews exist to catch misalignment early while it is cheap to fix. They are not meant to punish teams or block delivery at the end. You design compliance reviews around the highest impact risks such as identity and access, data handling, integration patterns, observability, resilience expectations, and platform standard usage. You also make reviews predictable, so teams can plan for them without interruption. When compliance reviews are run well, they improve delivery speed because teams avoid late-stage redesign and reduce operational incidents after release. With compliance reviews in place, you avoid bottlenecks by making reviews risk-based. High-risk changes, such as introducing new platforms, handling sensitive data, or changing shared integration layers require deeper review and stronger evidence. Lower risk changes, such as content feature updates within approved patterns, require lighter review. This approach respects team autonomy while still protecting the enterprise. It also builds trust because teams see that governance is fair and proportional. In phase G, risk-based review depth is one of your most powerful levers for preventing governance from becoming a delivery blocker. Now that reviews are calibrated, you strengthen delivery guardrails because guardrails reduce the need for frequent approvals. Guardrails include standard patterns, reference architectures, approved platforms, and baseline security and operational requirements. When guardrails are clear, teams can move fast without waiting for architecture input on every decision. Guardrails also improve quality because they embed proven practices and controls. In enterprise environments, guardrails are what make governance scalable because you cannot review every detail for every team. Phase G is where you ensure guardrails are being used and improved based on lessons learned. With guardrails established, you need exceptions because real delivery always encounters constraints. Exceptions are not bad. Hidden exceptions are bad. In phase G, you ensure that exceptions are requested transparently, assessed against risk, approved by the right authority, and time-bound with a plan to converge. You also ensure that compensating controls are identified when deviations introduce risk. This approach keeps governance human and practical while protecting enterprise outcomes. It also prevents the common failure where temporary deviations become permanent fragmentation. An effective exception process is a sign of mature architecture governance because it balances realism with control. Now that exceptions are handled properly, you need decision records because repeated debate is a major cost and delay driver. Decision records capture what was decided, why it was decided, what alternatives were considered, what risks were accepted, and what standards apply. This is valuable for leaders because it provides accountability. It is valuable for delivery because it prevents relitigating foundational decisions. It is valuable for governance because it provides traceability and audit evidence. In phase G, decision records help you turn architecture into an organizational memory that improves speed and consistency over time. With decision memory in place, you must treat operational readiness as a first-class governance concern. Many organizations deliver new capabilities and then struggle operationally because monitoring is missing, alerting is noisy, support processes are unclear, or recovery procedures are undefined. Phase G is where you ensure that operational expectations such as observability, incident response readiness, and support ownership are embedded into delivery guardrails. This is not about operational perfection. It is about ensuring that what is delivered can be operated safely and reliably. When operational readiness is governed, the enterprise experiences fewer incidents and delivery teams regain time that would otherwise be spent firefighting. Now that operational readiness is included, you integrate security assurance in a way that supports flow. Security should not appear late as a blocker. In phase G, you ensure security requirements from the architecture contract are met through predictable checkpoints and evidence-based reviews. You focus on high-impact controls such as identity and access, secrets management, logging and detection, encryption expectations, and secure configuration baselines. You also encourage teams to use approved security patterns so compliance is easier. When security assurance is built into governance properly, delivery becomes faster because teams do not face late redesigns and urgent remediation after deployment. With the approach clear, imagine you are governing a cloud landing zone and migration program. You use an architecture contract to define non-negotiables such as identity and access standards, network segmentation patterns, logging baselines, and approved platform services. You run risk-based compliance reviews so that foundation components receive deep review, while repeated workload migrations within approved patterns receive lighter review. You enforce guardrails through reference architectures and approved templates so teams can move quickly. You handle exceptions transparently when a legacy workload cannot meet a standard immediately. And you require a time-bound plan to converge. The result is faster migration with fewer incidents, because governance prevents drift while supporting delivery flow. Building on the cloud example, consider governance for consolidating applications and establishing authoritative data sources. Your architecture contract defines the authoritative source decisions, data ownership expectations, integration principles, and retirement criteria for legacy systems. Your compliance reviews ensure that new changes do not introduce additional data duplication and that integrations follow the approved patterns. You use decision records to prevent repeated arguments about data truth and system responsibility. You manage exceptions carefully because consolidation often requires temporary coexistence and controlled duplication during transition. The result is a consolidation program that reduces cost and confusion while maintaining continuity and trust in data. With examples in mind, you must design governance so it does not become a slow committee. You keep governance focused on decision points and high-risk controls. You define clear evidence expectations so teams know what to provide. You use risk-based review depth so not everything is reviewed equally. You make outcomes visible, such as reduced incidents and reduced rework, so teams see the value. You also provide reusable guardrails, such as patterns and reference architectures, so compliance is easier than non-compliance. When Phase G operates this way, teams perceive it as enablement and protection, not as bureaucracy. Now that you know how to avoid bureaucracy, you need success signals you can watch for. Governance is working when teams engage early and ask for direction before building because they trust the process. Governance is working when exceptions are transparent and time-bound rather than hidden and permanent. Governance is working when the number of late redesigns reduces because reviews happen early and guardrails are clear. Governance is working when incidents and operational surprises reduce because operational readiness is embedded. Governance is working when decisions are made faster because decision rights and evidence expectations are clear. These signals prove that Phase G is improving delivery outcomes, not slowing delivery. Let's now discuss the key takeaways from what you learned so far so you can apply it immediately. You learned that Phase G implementation governance is where architecture direction becomes real through practical guardrails, architecture contracts, compliance reviews, and transparent exceptions. You learned that architecture contracts are shared agreements that define scope, standards, non-negotiables, evidence expectations, and decision checkpoints without becoming heavy documents. You learned that compliance reviews must be early, predictable, and focused on preventing rework rather than acting as late audits. You learned that risk-based review depth protects delivery speed by applying deeper assurance only where risk and impact are high. You learned that delivery guardrails, such as approved patterns and baseline controls, reduce uncertainty and scale governance across many teams. You learned that exception handling is essential to remain practical, but it must be transparent, time-bound, and supported by compensating controls. Finally, you learned that decision records, operational readiness, and security assurance make governance sustainable because they create traceability, reduce repeated debates, and reduce incidents after delivery. Now that you know how to run Phase G implementation governance without slowing teams down, you are ready to create a governance system that protects the enterprise and speeds up delivery through clarity and reuse. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with your architecture and delivery peers, and comment with the one governance practice your organization needs most right now, such as clearer guardrails, better exception handling, or more predictable compliance reviews, and why it would make a difference.